Traitor. The harsh voice echoed round the chamber, the word amplified by the sconces and recesses of acoustic perfection wrought by master craftsmen coiled like a serpent through the air, multiplying, echoing, mocking, each repetition biting with the venom of an ancient hatred. Baroque-styled walls stretched into the darkness above, their filigree and icons dancing in the illumination from 1,000 candles. The runes and prayers wriggled and shifted with the light, making them seem alive in this hallowed place of a sickly devotion. Bestial heads carved from a dark basalt seemed to snarl hatred down at the scene, their hatred of the light seeming to dim the candles even further. A dark pall fell across the asp with a leaden mix of guilt and terror. The air itself burned the preacher's lungs, the smoke of a million candles lighting this sacred place in perpetuity for millennia. The acrid taste of blood that could never quite be washed away from the stones beneath his feet. The stench of his own fear, raw and pervasive. His gnarled hands grasped at his stick. It may once have been a symbol of office, of his power. Now it was the only thing keeping his withered legs from collapsing in terror. A pathetic crutch for a wretched soul.
Filth.
The voice seemed everywhere now, yet somehow closer. The shadows relentlessly shifted from side to side as if in protest at his presence. The arcane rituals of a superstitious sect from the ancient past. Adrenaline flooded his body. His heartbeat pounded like the drums of war he had heard so much about. His vision narrowed, not a warrior's gaze ready for battle, but the primal instinct of cornered prey, helpless and alone. A frightened whimper involuntarily forced its way from his lips.
Run.
The voice breathed across the nape of his neck with a grinning malice. A jolt of fear rose along with the hairs on his neck as he whipped his head around to find the blasphemous presence in his most holy of sanctuaries. There was nothing, only the shadows, forever dancing in the candlelight. His will broke. He fled. His robes a whirlwind of motion behind him, he raced with a speed that belied his age and condition. His sandals slapping with each footfall, the only echoing sound in that place, formed a counterpoint with his ragged breathing, itself adding to that primal fear. Down vast hallways decorated with iron braziers in their sconces, through halls of such magnificence they would make a man weep just to see them in their purity. Past ancient pews of carved and oiled mahogany, he raced to his master. With each step, the darkness grew. It was a maw of blackness that closed behind him. Teeth and claws formed from nothingness, ready to scratch and claw and tear. The closer he approached to his salvation, the closer he felt the jaws of death at his back. He had understood that monsters existed, that horrors lurked in the dark. But now, he knew they did. He arrived at his destination. 2 brass-bound wooden doors, made for ones much larger than himself. His footfalls stopped echoing, and he heard nothing. No wind, no voice. He spared a glance behind him. Shadows danced down the hallway, lit by braziers that stretched into the distance. His fading eyesight, enhanced by adrenaline, could pick out the furthest braziers winking out, one by one. The darkness was coming. It was coming for him. He tried to call out, to scream for his master to save him. Let his holy angel be his divine protector. Spare him from this horror. His throat, dry and tense in fear and exhaustion, made not a single squeak. He threw himself at the doors, a shriveled, aging body, weak from a lifetime of no hardship other than worship, scrabbled at the enormous weight of brass and wood. And still the darkness came on. The door inched open. almost reluctant to permit entry until the preacher could scrape himself through the gap. Splinters shredded into flesh, leaving bloody trails across the wood, but he felt nothing more than his panic. He was inside now. His lord and master sat on a throne of gilded glory, haloed by light, beautiful in feature, numinous in appearance, a shred of the divine wrought in human flesh. The Saviour looked upon the preacher with a pitiless gaze. The preacher opened his mouth to plead with his lord, to beg his aid, to forgive him for any weakness, to guide them against the oncoming darkness, but found that he could not. Was it the lack of pity in his angel's eyes that shocked him so? The fear at what he had witnessed? The culmination of decades of service that should be ended in such a horror? No. For he looked down at what remained of his chest, and the claws that had raked him through. Crackling blue light danced among the talons, forming images, connections, meanings. Had he been younger, he would have been fascinated at the corpuscent sights that dazzled among the blood and gore of what used to be his insides. With a last gasp of effort, he turned his head to try and see his killer, his monster, his demon. Yet there was nothing there. His body slipped to the ground even as his soul began to be ripped apart within the other realm by the inhabitants of that plane. The golden, glorious figure sat in his throne and witnessed his underling slaughtered like a piece of meat. If he felt anything at the death, nothing displayed on his face. Arrogance blazed from his features. Holy writings glowed within a light down his skin. This son of his father echoed with glory, yet was still a mere pale imitation compared to his gene sire. The monster in the dark faded away beyond his sight. The Golden One addressed no direction in particular as he spoke.
"Welcome, little raven. We've been expecting you."
His eyes roamed the walls, the sconces, the ceilings, each and every pool of blackness in the room. The foul scriptures roamed his body in a twisted panic, as if they too searched out the interloper.
Look at you, a shade clinging to the remnants of a shattered imperium, a carrion crow left to prowl among the carcasses of the dead. Do the shadows embolden you, little bird? Do they whisper strength and pretty lies into your ears? Or are you merely afraid to face the light, the truth, and the way? Do you do your work in the darkness out of fear of enlightenment?
At his word, the braziers lit up, illuminating more of the room, leaving fewer places to hide.
Your reckoning is at hand, little one. The dark gods elucidate what is hidden and bring the unseen into the light. You believe you have power here, yet I have seen your coming. This is an ambush, but not one of your design. No more will you trouble my kin.
With a dramatic flourish, he finished his soliloquy, and waited, and waited, and waited. Nothing was forthcoming. Only the crackling of braziers broke the silence. The anticipation grew with each thudding of his jewel heart until he could bear it no longer. The Golden One opened his mouth to speak when a voice arose from behind him.
No!
Before he could react, faster than thought, faster than sound, the darkness sliced through both of his shoulders, severing them utterly. Immediately afterwards, iron rods, clearly ripped from the holy statues that adorned the room, forced themselves through his legs and affixed him onto the throne which he had coveted so dearly.
You speak of traps,
spoke the darkness.
The rituals in the antechambers adjacent to this one? I ripped them apart before they could begin. Your cultists in the chambers above, no more will they pollute this world with their filth. You are alone. Alone as I am alone. As I shall ever be alone. You name me little bird, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Darkness began to coalesce in front of the Golden One, a mist of shadows and feathers and glowing red eyes, each moment gaining a more familiar corporeal aspect.
Now tell me, little one.
The darkness formed into straight chopped hair, bone-white skin, eyes of obsidian, and a noble, mournful visage that echoed with dignity. It would not have been out of place on the hundreds of tapestries scattered around the room, masterworks of centuries.
I can smell my brother. He was here. Where did he go?
When all had finished, well after the braziers had burned out, all light and sound extinguished by the darkness and the silence, the killer in the blackness spoke once more.
I'm coming for you, brother. Nevermore.